My name is Alexandra Morgan. I'm 28 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been carrying a secret that no one in my family knew. In the Morgan family, success isn't defined by creativity or innovation. It's measured by prestigious job titles and high-rise office views. At our yearly summer dinner, my Aunt Natalie cut through the small talk with a sharp jab. "Unemployed again," she quipped, raising one perfectly shaped eyebrow. But what she, and the rest of them, didn't know was about to change everything. Before I get to the moment, their jaws literally dropped when they saw my face on the cover of Fortune. Let me ask, have you ever been doubted by the very people who were supposed to believe in you? Drop a comment with where you're watching from. And if you've ever been underestimated, hit that subscribe button. Now back to the story. The Morgans aren't just a family name. They're a legacy. Morgan Financial has been a major name on Wall Street ever since my grandfather William transformed a modest brokerage firm into a financial empire during the 1970s. Our mansion in Connecticut is more than a home. It's a shrine to generational wealth and age-old expectations. Growing up, I learned that being a Morgan came with a rulebook, elite boarding schools, Ivy League degrees, and one day, a plush corner office at Morgan Financial. My parents, Judith and Frederick, had my life path carved out before I even learned to walk. My mother, always perfectly groomed and dressed in designer suits, was the picture of a corporate queen. My father, the CEO himself, stood tall as the embodiment of tradition, security, and unwavering loyalty to the old systems of finance. They weren't cruel or neglectful, just bound to a vision that didn't leave room for anything beyond the Morgan way. Alexandra has a head for numbers. My father would boast at company galas, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. She'll be perfect in risk assessment once she finishes at Harvard. Never mind that I had zero interest in either of those things. And then there was my cousin, Stephanie, Uncle Philip's daughter, 2 years older than me, and raised to be the next Morgan heir apparent. While most teens explored their identities, Stephanie was interning at Morgan Financial, attending market briefings, and shaking hands with board members at family events. Stephanie just landed her first major account. Uncle Philip would beam at dinners, youngest ever in our company to do it. He and my father were brothers, cooperative in public, but always subtly competing behind the scenes. Uncle Philip saw me as the family misfit, a Morgan who didn't match the mold. "Too bad Alexandra lacks Stephanie's discipline," he'd remarked to my father, loud enough for me to hear from across the room. "Wasting all that potential on those silly computer games." My grandparents had their own takes on my quiet rebellion. Grandfather William, the one who started it all, would watch me carefully when I tried to talk about new technology during family gatherings. He rarely got involved in my parents' decisions, but now and then, I'd see something in his eyes. Like maybe, just maybe, he understood more than he let on. Grandmother Eleanor, though, she was a fortress of tradition. "Alexandra, sit up straight," she'd say gently, adjusting my back with her perfectly manicured hand. A Morgan woman must carry herself with poise. She'd purse her lips at my obsession with gadgets. This tech fascination, it's just not proper. But no one criticized me more than Aunt Natalie. She married into the family, but was more Morgan than the Morgans themselves, desperate to prove she belonged by enforcing every old rule like gospel. She treated my love for technology like it was an insult to the very legacy she had clawed her way into. Computers and gadgets, she'd sniff. They're just toys. Real wealth is made in boardrooms, not by messing around with wires. And every summer, I braced myself for the family dinner. It was less of a reunion and more of a status report. Every family member took turns showcasing their achievements like trophies. But if you didn't play by their rules, you were a walking disappointment. I remember being 12, proudly telling everyone I had taught myself how to code. And Natalie's smile was cold. "How creative," she said. "But darling, focus on your math. Computers come and go. Finance is forever." By 16, I was building apps and winning science fairs. But to my family, they were cute side projects, little hobbies. Alexandra got another little award for her computer thing. My mother would say with an awkward laugh, but she's also doing great in economics. The family library didn't have a single book on tech. When I asked for programming books for Christmas, I got financial planning manuals. The laptop I used, bought secretly with babysitting money, and hidden in the closet any time relatives came over. The message was loud and clear. Technology was not a future. It was a phase. Every dinner reinforced that belief. Eventually, I stopped bringing up my passions. It was easier than listening to their dismissive tone or the looks they gave me. But inside, the fire burned stronger. When I finally got into Stanford's computer science program, it felt like someone had opened a window in a room I hadn't realized was suffocating me. I was thousands of miles away from Connecticut, and I could finally breathe. My parents only agreed to Stanford because it had a strong business school. They thought I'd grow out of tech stuff and switch tracks. But then I met Professor Evelyn Hayes. Her lecture on algorithm design changed everything. I stayed after class to ask questions. She listened, really listened. You don't think like the others. She told me, they see equations. You see the patterns behind them. She became the mentor I had always needed. Through her, I met innovators, tech leaders, venture capitalists, people who didn't care about family names, but about what you could create. Your last name might matter in finance. She said once, but here, it's what you build that counts. My first startup during senior year completely flopped. It was a peer-to-peer lending app. Great concept. Terrible timing. I was too focused on coding and forgot about regulations. When I called home, Uncle Philip said, with that signature smirk in his voice, "This is why Morgans stick to what they know. Come home. Your father has a job waiting." I almost gave in. The next 6 months were brutal. I moved into a tiny apartment in San Francisco. Barely left it. I lived on ramen and coffee. The doubt crept in louder than ever. Had I made a huge mistake? Was my family right? Then, one night, 3 a.m., raining outside, I woke up from a dream about my grandfather's old safe. In the dream, someone was hacking it. The alarm couldn't keep up because the system was ancient. That was my light bulb moment. Banks were guarding trillions with security systems that hadn't evolved in decades. I knew finance. I knew tech. That intersection, that weakness, was my opportunity. I didn't sleep for a week. I mapped out the blueprint for what would become SecureFlow, a real-time AI-powered system that could identify financial fraud and adapt to new threats instantly. I called it a shield for the digital age. I couldn't build it alone. So, I found others who had been underestimated. Just like me. Maria, brilliant coder, dropped out of high school. Jackson, cybersecurity genius, with a criminal record that kept him out of corporate jobs. Devin, design expert fired from top firms for being too unconventional. I told them the truth. We're building something that will protect everyday people and disrupt everything old systems thought was secure. We started in my cramped apartment, borrowed gear, maxed out credit cards, while my family thought I was licking my wounds after another failed dream. Then came our chance. I pitched our prototype to Garrett Wright, a notorious angel investor who only funded the boldest ideas. After the demo, he asked, "You're from that Morgan family. Why are you building this in a studio apartment?" I said, "Because my family builds the past. I want to build the future." He cut the check right there. From that moment, everything changed. But I still kept it quiet. I didn't want my family's name to open doors for me. So I used A.M. Morgan professionally. Not to hide, but to let my work speak before my last name did. By the time we raised our series of funding, $18 million, I still hadn't told them. At the next family dinner, when Aunt Natalie asked if I was still playing with computer games, I just smiled and passed the bread. SecureFlow was growing fast. Banks adopted our security systems, one after another. My team grew from 4 to 40 to 400. We moved from my apartment to a warehouse, then to a full skyscraper downtown. I avoided cameras, skipped award shows. Even at the height of our success, I kept my face hidden. Until one day, Fortune magazine called. They figured out A.M. Morgan was really Alexandra Morgan. "We want you on the cover," the reporter said. I thought about it long and hard, and finally said yes, on one condition. "You use my full name, Alexandra Morgan. No initials, no shadows, no secrecy." The shoot happened in my office, with San Francisco's skyline glowing behind me. I wore a black turtleneck and jeans, no designer label, no corporate costume. The headline, Alexandra Morgan, youngest billionaire reinventing financial security. The issue would drop the day after our next family dinner. I didn't plan it that way, but something greater did. Absolutely. Here is the continuation of the rewritten version, keeping the meaning intact while changing the wording, tone, and flow for storytelling and pacing. I pulled up to the Morgan estate in my modest electric car. The same towering wrought iron gates I'd known since childhood swung open, welcoming me into a world I no longer belonged to, yet had never quite left behind. The manicured lawns stretched out like a scene from a magazine. The fountain in the center, still grand and over the top, had graced the covers of luxury publications for decades. The house loomed ahead, regal, cold, proud, a monument not just to wealth, but to an era that refused to evolve. Jenkins, the butler who had worked for our family for as long as I could remember, opened the front door. He gave me the same polite nod he had given me since I was a little girl. "Miss Alexandra," he said, taking my coat with gloved hands. "Your family is in the east drawing room." I smoothed the fabric of my navy blue dress, elegant, quiet, deliberately simple, and took a deep breath. Those double doors might as well have been gates to a lion's den. My mother spotted me first. "Alexandra, darling!" She hurried toward me, her diamond earrings glittering under the chandelier. She hugged me in that brief, almost formal way that Morgans always do. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd come at all." My father nodded from across the room, standing near the fireplace, a glass of scotch in hand. "Traffic from the city?" he asked, assuming I still lived nearby. "Something like that," I said with a polite smile. Uncle Philip didn't bother with small talk. "Any word from that recruiter I referred you to?" "Gregory Stevens. He places top-tier candidates in high-end firms." "I've been tied up with other things," I replied coolly. "Projects don't pay the rent," he said, chuckling as he sipped his drink. "Unless playing with computers has become profitable these days." Cousin Stephanie glided over, elegant as ever in her custom Chanel suit, her diamond ring practically blinding. She air-kissed both of my cheeks. "It's been far too long," she said with a tight smile. "I've just been promoted to Senior Vice President of Client Relations, youngest ever at Morgan Financial." "Congratulations," I said genuinely, despite our complicated past. I truly meant it. Uncle Philip beamed. "She also closed the Peterson deal last quarter, $15 million in new assets under management, keeping the Morgan name where it belongs." Then came grandmother Eleanor. Her steps were slow but intentional, supported by her black cane. Her silver hair was perfectly arranged, her pearl necklace resting like armor. "Alexandra," she said softly, voice laced with caution. "Still pursuing your interests?" "Yes." "Grandmother, still working in technology?" She gave the faintest frown and patted my hand before turning away. Grandfather William gave me the briefest nod from across the room. Just a glint in his eye gave away his inner thoughts. At precisely 8 o'clock, Jenkins announced dinner. We made our way to the grand dining room, the table gleaming, set with heirloom silver and china, a tribute to generations past. I was seated in my usual place, between grandmother and cousin Stephanie, a front row seat to subtle judgment from both sides of the timeline. As the soup was served, my father began the performance. "The markets have been quite favorable this quarter, particularly for traditional strategies. Uncle Philip added with a smug smile, "The tech sector's showing cracks. All that hype and disruption, nothing solid underneath." I stayed quiet, just stirred my soup. "Alexandra," my mother said suddenly, trying to sound cheerful, "tell everyone what you've been up to lately." Every pair of eyes turned toward me. This was always the part one dreaded, the moment they waited to be reassured that I was finally ready to fall back in line. "I've been working on financial technology," I said calmly. Aunt Natalie tilted her head with mock concern. "Still dabbling in that startup hobby?" "No," I said. "I've moved on to new ventures." "Which ones?" Uncle Philip pressed. "Anything we've heard of. It's still under development," I replied, sidestepping again. Stephanie, always the family PR rep, chimed in. "Actually, we're doing some tech enhancements at Morgan Financial too. Nothing disruptive, of course, just modernizing existing systems." "Exactly," Aunt Natalie nodded. "Technology should support proven methods, not replace them." The conversation shifted. They praised Stephanie again, congratulated cousin David on his new job at Goldman Sachs. I focused on my duck confit and said little. Alexandra was always clever. My mother added at one point, "She just needs some direction." I had my first fund at 28. Uncle Philip said pointedly, "It's all about discipline and staying focused." "Times are changing," Grandfather said quietly. "Not that much," Aunt Natalie countered. "The rules for success are timeless: hard work, connections, proven institutions." As dessert was being cleared, Aunt Natalie leaned forward. Her wine glass clicked against her bracelet as she looked at me. "So," she said, her voice syrupy, "still job hunting?" She smiled sweetly. "At your age." I had already sat on 2 boards and hosted the Morgan Gala 3 years in a row. Silence. Everyone waited for my answer. I took a breath. "I wouldn't exactly say I'm unemployed." "Oh," she said with a raised brow. "Then what would you call it?" "Freelance. Still doing those computer hobbies." Before I could respond, Jenkins walked into the dining room with something in his hands. A silver tray. He never interrupted dinner. "Pardon the intrusion," he said formally, "but Mr. Morgan's advance copy of tomorrow's Fortune magazine has arrived." He asked to be informed the moment it came. Time froze. My heart pounded. This was it. Jenkins walked over to my father and handed him the magazine, cover down. He accepted it distractedly, still mid-sentence. "Thank you, Jenkins. As I was saying, our conservative model." He flipped the magazine over and stopped. His words fell apart in his throat. Seconds passed. 2, 3. The silence grew loud. "Frederick," my mother asked, confused, "is something wrong?" He didn't answer. He just turned the magazine around for everyone to see. And there I was, standing tall, the San Francisco skyline glowing behind me, my arms folded, calm, confident, wearing my signature black turtleneck. Above me, in bold font, Alexandra Morgan, youngest billionaire reinventing financial technology. No one moved. No one spoke. My mother's water glass slipped from her hand. Uncle Philip reached for the magazine with trembling fingers. This has to be a joke." Stephanie leaned over to see better. Her face turned pale. "Secure flow," she whispered. "You're A.M. Morgan." Grandmother's teacup rattled on its saucer. "Alexandra, explain this now." Aunt Natalie's mouth opened and shut like a fish gasping for air. For once in her life, she had no words. My father finally found his voice. "Is this some prank? Did you mock this up?" I looked around the table, at the very people who had doubted me, who had dismissed my dream. "No," I said clearly. "It's real. The magazine comes out tomorrow." I took a deep breath. Secure Flow is mine. I founded it 3 years ago. "Secure Flow," my father repeated slowly. "That's the system First National rolled out last quarter." I nodded. "And 17 other major institutions, including 3 international banks. My mother clutched her pearls. 4 billion, she whispered. I still own the majority. I replied, 63%. The rest belongs to our early investors and team. Grandmother stared at me, shaken. You've been building a tech empire while we thought you were jobless. Yes, I said. But why hide it? My mother asked, pain in her voice. Why not tell us? I looked at all of them, the faces I'd known all my life, faces that saw my passion as foolish, my path as failure. Would you have believed me? I asked gently. Would you have supported me or try to steer me back again? No one answered, but in their silence, I got my answer. Then grandfather laughed, loud and deep. It started as a chuckle and grew into a booming roar that shook the chandelier. Magnificent, he said, slapping the table. Absolutely magnificent. He raised his glass to Alexandra, who understood what I forgot. Tradition without innovation is just stagnation. That broke the silence. Suddenly, everyone started talking at once. Questions flew from every direction. How? When? Why? And I raised a hand. They quieted. For years, I let your disapproval shape me in silence. But I didn't build this to impress you, or to prove you wrong. I paused. I built Secure Flow because I believed in it, because it needed to exist. My father stared at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Recognition. And maybe, finally, respect. We have a lot to talk about, he said softly. Yes. I nodded. We do. The table was forgotten. The desserts left untouched. Jenkins, always discreet, began directing the staff to quietly clear the plates as everyone gravitated toward the grand living room. Still holding the Fortune magazine like a sacred relic, Uncle Philip stared down at the cover again, reading aloud in disbelief. It says here your algorithm detects fraud with 99.8% accuracy. That's unheard of, he murmured, almost to himself. Our core system is built with a neural network. I explained, trained on millions of real financial transactions. It adapts. It learns. Unlike the old rule-based systems, which can't keep up with new threats. My father paced near the fireplace, his scotch untouched. He kept glancing over at me, then at the magazine, like trying to piece together a puzzle that suddenly made sense, but in a way he hadn't expected. You know this could revolutionize the entire industry, he said at last. Quietly. That's the goal, I replied. Uncle Philip straightened, puffing out his chest. Well, I've always said you had potential, he declared. Business is in your blood. After all, just didn't expect you to apply it to this kind of thing. I smiled. Not bitter, just amused. Funny. That's not quite what I remember hearing. He cleared his throat and looked away. Cousin Stephanie sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her face pale. So, when I was telling you about my promotion last Christmas, you were already the CEO of Secure Flow? Yes, I said gently. Her cheeks flushed. I must have sounded ridiculous. You sounded passionate. I corrected. And there's nothing ridiculous about that. My mother sat next to me, touching my arm as if to make sure I was real. I just don't understand why you kept it from us. Alexandra, we're your family. I looked her in the eyes. If I told you 3 years ago that I was turning down the job at Morgan Financial to start a tech company, what would you have said? She looked down. I would have told you it was a mistake. I nodded slowly. You all would have, and I needed the space to try, to fall flat on my face, or to fly without the weight of your expectations pulling me back down. But we could have helped. My father said, given you capital, introductions. I didn't want your capital. I said, my voice calm but firm. I wanted to earn it, build it, with my own hands. Not because I had the Morgan name, but because I had something worth building. Silence. They were listening in a way they never had before. Aunt Natalie, who'd been quiet for an unnaturally long time, finally broken. Well, I always said you had a unique view of the world. It was such a transparent attempt to rewrite history. I almost laughed. Did you? I said sweetly. I remember you calling my interest in computers a waste of time. She chuckled, tight-lipped. You must have misunderstood me, dear. I only meant I hoped you'd find a proper outlet for your talents. I let it go. I didn't need to win that fight. Her desperation to align herself with my success said more than words ever could. Then Grandmother Eleanor stood slowly, walking over to me with grace and quiet resolve. I would very much like to see this office of yours one day, she said, to understand what you've made. Her request surprised me more than anything else that night. I'd be honored, I replied. Around the room, family members were pulling out their phones, searching for secure flow in real time. Their eyes widened as they read article after article. Awards, partnerships, valuations. You were named Technology Innovator of the Year, Cousin David said in shock. There was a whole ceremony. I sent my CTO. I explained. I wasn't ready to go public yet. Uncle Philip stared at his screen. This says the last funding round was at $4.2 billion. That can't be right. It was, I said. And that was 6 months ago. It's likely gone up since. My father slumped into his leather chair, almost in disbelief. My daughter is a billionaire, he whispered. A billionaire who I was trying to convince to take an entry-level job. Jenkins reappeared quietly with a tray of brandy. If I may, Miss Alexandra, he said, your company's quarterly reports have been quite impressive, especially in the European markets. The growth trajectory is extraordinary. Every head turned to him in shock. You knew, my mother asked. I suspected, Jenkins replied, standing straight as ever. I subscribe to several tech newsletters. SecureFlow has been featured many times. The profile of A.M. Morgan bore a rather familiar resemblance. I laughed. Thank you for your discretion, Jenkins. He gave a small bow. Not my story to tell. Mississippi. As brandy was served, the questions kept coming. What made you finally go public? My father asked. It was getting harder to separate my identity from the company. I said, and with our upcoming IPO, transparency is essential for investor trust. IPO. Uncle Philip leaned forward, suddenly energized. Well, naturally Morgan Financial should handle the underwriting. I can assemble a team by morning. And there it was, the attempt to reclaim me. I had been waiting for it. Thank you, Uncle, I said gently. But we've already signed with Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan. The paperwork's done. His face fell. But we're family. Wouldn't you want to keep this within the Morgan Group? SecureFlow isn't part of the Morgan Group, I said evenly. It never was. It never will be. A chill fell over the room. You must understand, my father said slowly, how this appears. A Morgan building a financial empire outside the family brand. I understand exactly how it appears. I said, it appears as a woman who chose her own road and made it work. The evening carried on, slowly winding down as people processed the reality that I wasn't just one of them anymore. I was something entirely new. By midnight, the house had quieted. Most of the family had retreated, drifting off in pairs or alone, still processing everything they had just learned. Only my father remained, seated in the study, the fire flickering low. He held a half-empty glass of scotch and stared into the flames like they held the answers. I paused at the open door. May I come in? I asked gently. He looked up, surprised but nodded. Of course. I took the seat across from him, the same leather chair I'd sat in countless times before. Except this time, I wasn't a child being scolded or lectured. This time, I was something else. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, watching it catch the firelight. I'm not angry, he said after a long silence. I'm hurt. 3 years. Alexandra. 3 years of building something revolutionary. And you never told us. It wasn't about trust. I said softly. It was about space. I needed distance from everything the Morgan name expected me to be. He nodded slowly. We only ever wanted what was best for you. You wanted what you thought was best. I replied, my voice calm. There's a difference. He breathed in deeply. Fair enough. Then, with that same old steel in his voice, he asked, but why tech? Why not build something here? Something that added to the Morgan legacy. I leaned forward. Because the future of finance is technology. He didn't respond. So I went on. Banks, investments, insurance, they're all being transformed. The institutions that don't adapt will collapse. I saw it. I tried to say it. But no one listened. He blinked, surprised by my conviction. We've been in this business for generations. It breeds resistance to change. I know, I said, and that's why I couldn't build secure flow from within. The Morgan model sees tech as a tool. I see it as the foundation. My father leaned forward too, elbows on his knees. I'll admit something to you, he said quietly. I've been scared for a while now, watching tech companies dismantle centuries-old industries. He paused, staring into his glass again. I've been holding the wheel of a ship that might already be sinking. I hadn't expected that. Not from him. You're not sinking, I said. But you're right. The tides are rising fast. I paused. Secure Flow isn't here to replace banks like Morgan Financial. We're here to protect them. His eyes flicked to mine. You're saying you're not here to destroy us. No, I said simply. I'm trying to make sure you survive. He sat back, silent for a moment, then nodded. Maybe it's time I learn more about what you've built. There was a soft knock at the door. My mother stepped in, her composure a little frayed. May I join you? We both nodded. She moved to sit gently on the arm of my father's chair, resting her hand on his shoulder. Alexandra, she began. I need to say this now before I lose the courage. I looked at her. I'm sorry. Those two words caught in my chest. I should have supported your passion, she said. Instead, I try to fit you into a mold, the Morgan mold, and I see now it never fit you. Thank you, I said quietly, the words wrapping around my heart. That means more than you know. She touched my cheek gently. I want to understand, not just nod politely and change the subject like I used to. I want to really know what you've built. And that night, we talked, for hours, about Secure Flow, about the mission, about the code, the partnerships, the vision. For the first time, they saw me, not as a legacy misstep, but as a creator, a force of my own. The next morning brought more of the same. One by one, family members came to me with their own versions of apology or awe. Cousin Stephanie found me on the terrace. She handed me a cup of coffee, then leaned silently on the stone railing next to me. I've been jealous of you, she said finally. 4 years. I thought I was ahead of you. Promotions, awards, perfect track. But now I see you weren't lost. You were just flying while I was still crawling. I shook my head gently. You're brilliant, Stephanie. What you've built at Morgan Financial is impressive. She sighed. Maybe, but I've never created anything. I looked at her. You're about to. Your journey just starts in a different place than mine. She nodded slowly. Then let me tell you something in return, she said. I just got approval to launch an innovation division within Morgan Financial. I'm leading it. We're finally bringing emerging tech into the core of our operations. That's incredible, I said, smiling. Really? I'm proud of you. She looked away, trying not to let her emotions show. You inspired it, she said softly. Uncle Philip was more predictable. He cornered me in the library, folder in hand. I've drawn up a plan, he said eagerly. A joint venture between Morgan Financial and Secure Flow. Think about it, your technology, our infrastructure. I flipped through the glossy pages, briefly before closing the folder. "Thank you for the offer," I said politely. "But Secure Flow isn't joining any empire, not even the Morgan one." He narrowed his eyes slightly. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I said, "but it's my mistake to make." Aunt Natalie tried her own version of reinvention. "I always knew you had a spark," she said at lunch. "You were different. In a good way." "Really?" I asked, smiling. "What was it about my tech obsession you found promising?" She paused, then blushed slightly. Perhaps I was overly traditional in my thinking. I let her have the out. Some people only change when the tide is already swept in. But the biggest surprise came from Grandfather William. He asked me to walk with him through the gardens. We moved slowly, his steps careful, but his eyes sharp. "Did I ever tell you about my first business idea?" he asked. I shook my head. "Before Morgan Financial, when I was 22, I tried to build a stock ticker system, automated updates using early computing models. It failed miserably. My father called it a foolish distraction. So I buried it." He looked up at me. "But it was the right idea. Just too early." I stopped in my tracks. "You tried to build a fintech company before anyone even called it that?" He nodded, a twinkle in his eye. "I've been following your company for years. You know, I had my assistant print out every article. You hid well, but I recognized your mind. Your touch. You knew." I whispered, "I knew. And I said nothing because I knew you needed to do it your way." He patted my hand. "And you did. Brilliantly. That night, I stood at dinner again, but this time, with purpose. I'd like to invite you all to visit Secure Flow headquarters next month," I said. "Meet the team. See what we're building. Not as investors. Not as partners. As family." There was a murmur of agreement. "I also want to be clear," I added. "This isn't a step toward merging with Morgan Financial. It's an opportunity to learn, to understand, and maybe collaborate as equals." My father nodded. "We come as learners," he said. Uncle Philip tried to add something business-wise, but Grandmother shut it down with a single sharp glance. And I looked around the room, at the same faces that once dismissed me. They hadn't fully changed, but they had started to see. And I realized something powerful. I hadn't been waiting for their approval after all. I had already validated myself, brick by brick, line by line, bit by bit of code. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner of my own. But this one wasn't in a marble-floored mansion with antique chandeliers and century-old china. It was in my San Francisco penthouse. Glass walls looked out over the bay. No inherited furniture, no stiff floral arrangements. Just clean lines, warm lighting, and the quiet hum of innovation. This was my home. And now, for the first time ever, I was opening it to the Morgans. My family arrived, looking slightly out of place but trying to blend in. My father wandered to the floor-to-ceiling window with Grandfather, both marveling at the view, whispering about real estate. My mother and Grandmother admired the modern artwork, pieces from Young. Local artists I'd supported. Cousin Stephanie hugged me tightly and then wandered off to chat with my lead developer. Even Uncle Philip had softened, slightly, though he still managed to mention synergy at least 3 times before appetizers. But I didn't mind. Something had shifted, and not just in them, in me. At dinner, my COO, Lauren, gave a casual update. "We've opened new offices in London, Berlin, and Stockholm this quarter," she said. "Frankfurt Banking Consortium signed on last week." The Morgans blinked. This wasn't their usual kind of dinner table conversation. But they listened, really listened. My father leaned in. "Your system prevented 3 breach attempts at First National last month. I heard about it at the Global Finance Summit. They couldn't stop praising you." I smiled. "It works. That's what matters." The table was alive with something I'd never felt at a Morgan dinner before: balance. Personal updates. Business ideas. Laughter. Not hierarchy, but conversation. Not competition, but connection. Later that night, Stephanie joined me on the balcony, coffee in hand. The innovation division is live, she said quietly. Launched it last week. We're starting small, but it feels right. I'm proud of you, I said. She looked at me, eyes glinting in the moonlight. Not about size, right, but about impact. Exactly. Inside, my parents and grandparents were huddled around a digital screen that displayed SecureFlow's real-time global map, a constellation of tiny pulses, each one a financial transaction, each one protected. My mother placed her hand over her heart. It's beautiful, she whispered, like a web of safety. That's exactly what it is, I said. Grandmother stepped beside her. She reached for my hand and held it, eyes moist but steady. I was wrong, Alexandra. We all were. We tried to fit you into our story, but you were writing your own. That moment was worth every sleepless night, every whispered doubt, every dismissal. Because it wasn't just forgiveness, it was understanding. In the months after that evening, something extraordinary unfolded. SecureFlow and Morgan Financial didn't merge, but we partnered, a collaboration between old money and new vision. My father became an unlikely advocate for cybersecurity, speaking at banking summits about the future of finance. Stephanie's division grew faster than expected, and the Morgan name, once known only for tradition, started becoming synonymous with innovation too. Not every relationship healed completely. Aunt Natalie still made occasional remarks about lucky timing or riding the wave. But I didn't need to correct her, because for the first time, her words had no power over me. The girl who once hid her laptop in a closet was gone. The woman standing in her place had nothing to prove. One evening, as the sun dipped below the Golden Gate, Grandfather asked for everyone's attention during another dinner at my place. He raised his glass. To Alexandra, he said, voice rich with pride, to the one who reminded us all that innovation without tradition can be brilliant, but tradition without innovation is doomed. You didn't abandon the Morgan legacy. He continued. You elevated it. Later that night, I stood alone by the window, staring out at the city lights dancing on the water. 3 years of silence. 3 years of building something in the dark. And now, finally, the world saw it. But the real win wasn't on the cover of a magazine. The real win was within, knowing that I had followed my own calling, and it had led me not just to success, but to freedom. Not from my family, but from needing their approval. The next morning, news broke of the upcoming IPO. The cover story featured both Morgan Financial's neoclassical headquarters in Connecticut and SecureFlow's sleek tower in San Francisco. The headline, Tradition Meets Transformation. How the Morgans are building the future together. As I read the article, I smiled, not because I needed the praise, but because I knew, somewhere out there, a young girl was being told her dreams were silly, her ideas too strange, her path too uncertain, and maybe, just maybe, this story would find her, and she'd know you don't have to fit the mold to belong. You don't need approval to be worthy. You don't need a title to change the world. You just need one thing, belief in yourself. And once you have that, nothing can stop you, not even the people who said you never would. So now I ask you, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever proven someone wrong who told you to stay in your lane? Share your story in the comments. And if mine resonated with you, like, subscribe, and send this to someone who needs to remember your worth isn't up for debate. It's already written, and no one, not even your own family, can erase it, because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you build. And you're just getting started. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.